Welcome to the She's Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hello, everybody. The She's Bold podcast. This is where I feature one-on-one, in-person conversations with some pretty awesome women. They are best-selling authors. They're musicians, professional athletes, doctors, spiritual practitioners, and in the case of today's guest, everyday people who have a story to share. They have insight and inspiration that's born out of remarkable circumstances or introspection and observations about themselves. So thank you for being here and for joining me for another episode. We're at 102. Isn't that amazing? I started this podcast because I love the medium. I love listening to podcasts and learning and being inspired by other people's stories. But I was frustrated that at least the ones that I was attracted to, the podcasts that I was listening to, usually long format, in-depth conversations, were not only hosted by men, but also their guests were mostly men. And I wanted to hear from women. I wanted to know how women were making their way through the world. I think it's so important to hear their stories, our stories, and their perspective on things. So here we are, the She's Bold podcast. If you are impacted by these stories, if you love listening to them and find the slightest bit of inspiration, lay it on me. I want to hear from you. You can leave a review in iTunes. You can leave a message at 877-280-5170. You can even ask a question there. I'll answer it on one of the future episodes. Or you can email me at beth@shesboldpodcast.com. A big shout out to my Patreon supporters. These folks enjoy the podcast and show their support with a monthly pledge of $2 or more, just $2 a month. When you are a Patreon supporter, you have a chance to join our private Facebook group and join in the conversation there. And what I do is I share some behind the scenes details about the podcast, and I give you a chance to submit questions to guests in advance. And you also have access to bonus content, which is generally in the form of a question I ask of the guest, and I reserve it just for Patreon supporters. You can check out shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon for details. So today's guest is Kellie Phelan. Kellie is the founder of The Works Seattle. The Works offers DIY classes for a variety of things, including cooking, canning, sewing, art classes, pumpkin carving, tarot card reading, and much, much more. But for Kellie, The Works is more than just a classroom or a place for learning. It's a place for connecting. It's where people come together, and yes, they're learning a new skill, but they're also making friends in the process. They are connecting with each other. You know, strangers are meeting. It's really pretty cool. Obviously, this is resonating with a lot of people because The Works is growing by leaps and bounds. Kellie shares her story of how The Works came to be and how it was an illness that made her realize she needed to leave a stressful job and find work that resonated with her, one in which she could create a lifestyle business. I really do love Kellie's positive can-do attitude and the way that she's made the best of situations, and you'll hear all about that. Our conversation started with a topic that was totally unrelated, and it was a surprise to me and something that I had to dig deeper into, and I think that you'll find that equally as interesting as her whole story about her work. Okay, with that, please enjoy this conversation with Kellie Phelan. You know, the first thing I want to ask you, it's Kellie Phelan? Phelan. I'm so glad I asked. Okay, so I have that now.
And I think it's probably a bastardized pronunciation back from Ireland.
Ah, so you're Irish. Are you like full on
Irish? I mean, look at all my moles and freckles.
Yeah. Well, you're in a good place, right? Seattle for kind of Irish
I
weather
will
too.
Take a day like this over a day like yesterday.
Oh,
any day.
really? See, I loved yesterday. That was my kind of day. Yeah. I love that. But still, you know what? Today's a productive day. Like when it's cloudy.
I know.
And a little misty, and I don't have any desire to go sit outside or go like work in the garden, or just go for a walk, then I'm like, okay, head down, get some work done.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. So have you been to Ireland?
I never have. It's on the list. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Do you have a long list?
I have a list. Well, now I have twin babies, so we'll see. They need to get a little older, I think, before we do big travels.
How old are they?
They're 8 months.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's young.
Yeah.
That's a handful, huh?
Yeah, it's really fun, but it's also crazy. Well, I don't know what it's like to have one. They're just fun to play with. They're not like baby blobs that just lay there all day.
Yeah. Like the first 7 months.
Yeah. And it feels like every day there's something new, where like some new movement or some new light bulb moment. And it's just very cool to watch. I feel like this is to be very honest, I'm really looking forward to them being like kids, where we can do more adventuring. And, our family loves to go camping. We take them camping as babies, but I don't think they can like appreciate it.
No, but I hear people say that. I hear some people say that they won't travel with their kids until the kids will have a memory of it. And I don't have kids, so what do I know? But I hear people say that. But I think that there's like muscle memory in there. I just think that if you get them used to it, then they're going to be used to it.
Right.
And then it's just going to be easier. So if you take your kid at 6 months or 18 months and you go on a plane or you go camping or you go do something, then it's going to be easier when they're 2 years old or when they're 4 years old, because it's just...
And it's easier for the parents. The parents are like, because Matt and I, we camped every weekend. We've camped all over the Pacific Northwest, and throw 2 kids in the mix with car seats and all their gear and diapers to think about and all this stuff. And you're like, oh, first of all, it's what we like to do. So we're like, all right, kids, you're coming with us. This is what mom and dad like to do.
Well, that sounds like fun. Sounds like you are having fun with them for sure.
Yeah.
And in the process, you're growing a business. You have another baby.
Yes.
That's
Triplets.
that's a little bit more mature, maybe, in some ways.
The business is a pinch older than the babies. Is it more mature? I don't know.
So you started the business when you were pregnant.
So I actually didn't carry the twins.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Totally.
Please.
So my husband and I tried to get pregnant for 6 years unsuccessfully, which is a whole other roller coaster of a journey. And ultimately, we ended up being able to work with another amazing woman who carried our babies for us. So she was pregnant when the business was starting up. So we were collectively pregnant, but I was not the person who was physically pregnant.
Your eggs?
My eggs and my husband's sperm, yeah. So we went through 3 rounds of IVF to create what ended up being 2 embryos. The first round of IVF, we didn't end up with any embryos. So that's pretty soul crushing from that perspective, and trying to kind of pick yourself up and dust yourself off after that and think like, does this make sense? We had very seriously explored adoption before surrogacy became an option for us. And after that first round of IVF, we thought, was this a mistake? Should we go back to thinking about other alternative ways to have a family? It's interesting. A lot of people just get pregnant, and that's amazing, right? And that, in a lot of ways, like that's the way it should be, and may no one have to struggle with a journey like this. But the other side of that is when you do struggle with it for any period of time, and in our case, 6 years, there is a strong intentionality that comes with. You don't just poof, get pregnant, like, maybe someday we'll have kids, poof, you're pregnant. Not that there's anything, like I am expressing no judgment about all the different ways to parenthood. But 6 years of really working through all the ups and downs and the whole path, and you're pretty sure at that point. So anyway, we went through the first round of IVF, and hopes were so high, and we ultimately ended up without any embryos. And we really had to, that was like a point in the road where we had to regroup, and think about, are we going to try this again? And
well, it's expense.
I was just going to say,
right.
Yeah.
It's expense and emotion. There's 2 big costs there.
Mm-hmm. And in a way, the expense adds to the emotion, it like creates additional emotion. So anyway, we went forward with the second round and thought, we will try this one more time. And we made 1 embryo. And just because you have an embryo doesn't mean that you end up pregnant. It's all kinds of these other crazy factors, not least of which is my age, right? And
How old are you?
I'm 36. So I was 35 when we were going through IVF.
Which still in this day and age seems on the young side. Like I don't even know if that's considered geriatric pregnancy at this point, but still considering so many people go through their 20s without not even thinking of kids. Like that's not even an option for them.
Right.
So in the 30s seems normal.
Yeah. They give you the stats tables, and it's, you see the drop off happening in terms of success rates as you approach your 40s and into your 40s. And anyway, so we ended up with one embryo, which was like, okay, we have one, let's move forward and try this. And ultimately we did then a third round of IVF to create at the time what we thought would be a backup embryo that would just sit frozen for, if we needed it, if the first was not successful, or if we could be so lucky as to have two kids, and if we could be so lucky as to not have to have me go through another round of IVF, even a couple years down the road when I'm now 38, 39. And ultimately you see how this turned out, which is we put both of the embryos in together. And when you do that, there's about a 50-50 chance that you end up with twins. And in a way that's been a total dream come true.
Yeah. One and done, right? You have like two kids at once.
People see us, with them out and they're like, family in a box. Yeah. And I'm like, that's interesting to me because there's so many different versions of families that it doesn't necessarily mean just because we're one mom, one dad, one boy, and one girl that we're like, but in a way we are like the perfect nuclear family. And I'm like, that's not how I see us, but
Well, you're the perfect family because it's you and that's how it needs to be. Right.
Yeah.
What was it like having someone else carry your kids?
It was a whole mix of everything that you can imagine. I mean,
were you able to choose the surrogate? And I'm sorry, I have no idea about this world, so it's pretty fascinating.
No, I'm very happy to share. And you're not alone. There's a lot of people who know nothing about this world, and I was one of those people before we started this process. It's not how it was portrayed in the comeback season of Gilmore Girls, where you go and shop through a book of picking people. It's actually a very intentional process where they really want you to be aligned on some very basic things that are hard to talk about, like what if there was a medical need to terminate a pregnancy. Ideally, there's a personality match because this is going to be a person who's carrying your baby or babies for up to 9 months and all the doctor's appointments and milestones along the way, and then going through the not insignificant process of birthing your babies, or in our case, babies, plural. And, we really wanted to have a relationship with this person for the rest of our lives. I just personally, as a woman, felt like this is such a significant act to do for someone else. And it's a relationship that feels as significant to me as like a parent or a sibling or an aunt or an uncle or a best friend. But it's not any of those relationships. It's entirely different. But so significant. So that was something that we looked for. So anyway, yes, we went through a whole matching process and ended up with a woman in Portland who was just absolutely amazing. Yeah.
What do you know what her drive was behind wanting to carry someone else's kids?
That's one of the first questions that I had just in general about the process. It's like, who are these women? Yeah. This is so amazing.
Like, is it only financial? I mean, because that would be my first thing was like, okay, so it's a financial thing. They get paid for it. But then, then there's all the emotion. Like it goes back to that whole emotional thing too. Yeah.
So I'm sure that there's some variance here, but we worked with Northwest Surrogacy, which is a Pacific Northwest based agency. And they actually started an open adoption agency 20 years ago that still exists, that now has grown into also providing surrogacy, because of course IVF hasn't been around for that long, right? We used to talk about like test tube babies, quote unquote. So who are these amazing women? And the answer is, at least in this world, most of them are very altruistic. They are motivated by the idea that they could help another family expand their family. And yes, they are compensated. What amount of money is enough money to compensate someone for using their body to carry a baby for 9 months and birthing that baby and all that comes before and during and after that? I don't know the answer to that question, but I don't think that any amount of money is really quite the right amount of money to provide something as selfless as that for another family. And so they really look for women who are motivated out of wanting to be, this maybe is a strange phrase to use here, but of service. And so Jacqueline, who carried our babies for us, a coworker of hers, did this about 2 years ago. And that's how Jacqueline first heard of it. Her coworker shared that she was going through this process and she was going to be pregnant. And Jacqueline shared with me that the moment she learned that this was a thing that she could do, she immediately was drawn to it.
Wow.
And she knew she wanted to do it. Yeah. And she has two kiddos of her own, 2 boys. And, at the time they were like 6 and 10. They weren't babies, so it'd been 6 years since she had a baby. She just thought, wow, if I could help a family, I want to do that. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is really amazing. I can't even imagine. So good for you. That's great.
Thanks. Yeah. It's truly, it's very hard to express in words what the journey has been like. And then it's a very surreal process to quote unquote be pregnant, but specifically as a woman, but to not be the one who's carrying the babies, and to remain connected to that process, and also just to let go of a lot of, to have trust and faith, but also to let go of like, what does it mean to be a woman, and what does it mean to be a mom, and what does it mean to not be the one who's pregnant or birthing the babies. And so there was a lot to work through there.
And hoping that Jacqueline's not off smoking and drinking at night. And I mean, I'm sure she wasn't, but you know what I mean? It's like, and I'm using a total extreme there, but it's kind of like, okay, is this person going to live kind of the lifestyle that we would live too? Because that's all going to influence the kid.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's very rigorous screening in place for all of this, but also it really does come down to an act of faith and an act of trust of, I trust this person who's willing to do this for us, to make her very best decisions. And ultimately, and I don't know if this is how everyone who's gone through this type of journey feels, but how I felt was, I really felt like Jacqueline probably made even better decisions than I would have made for myself if I had been the one who was pregnant, because she just felt, I think, the weight of, these are Matt and Kellie's babies. I will do anything in the world that I can do for them. It was really amazing.
And plus she'd already been through it twice. Mm-hmm. So she had an idea of what the process was like too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to get back to that, you were not actually pregnant yourself.
Yes.
You were not ready to give birth yourself.
Right.
As you were giving birth to your business, but your business was born right around that time as well. So,
yes.
So The Works Seattle is your company. And first, you gave a really beautiful description to my husband just before we were recording. You were explaining what it was, and I'm sure you do it all the time. But can you kind of give us a synopsis of what it is, and then we'll kind of deconstruct that a little bit.
Really, our mission, we have a big farmhouse table in the shop, and our mission is to get as many people together around that table as we can to connect and to learn and to do something hands-on. And, we call ourselves The Works because we do a little bit of everything from teaching you how to make pickles, to mend your jeans, to read tarot, and everything in between. And I really believe that what we do in that space has ripple effects out into people's lives.
How is that? What's the ripple effect?
I think the ripple effect is, you're creating space in your life, but you're learning something. I mean, there's a million different examples we could go through, but there may be pausing and thinking about like, oh yeah, why did we used to can produce? And why don't we do it anymore? And it's interesting, you don't have to talk to too many people before someone has a story similar to, oh, my grandma always used to grow tomatoes and can tomatoes for the winter. And so there's enough of a connection there to like previous generations and these kind of time-honored traditions, but somewhere along the way, at least in our urban environment here, we've sort of lost that passing down. And so that's what I think about from a ripple effect perspective. And maybe it's just like, I went to a watercolor class and I got to just take a little time and space and I think of it as like a moving meditation. It's not necessarily a facilitated meditation or anything structured, but you're there, you're doing something with your hands, you're talking to the person next to you who you've never met before, who's maybe different than you in some way, and you're just with your thoughts. And so what kind of space does that create in your life when you leave the shop? And it maybe isn't necessarily going into work the next day and talking to your coworkers, but it's some other, hard to quantify sort of thing. But I think, I used to work in environmental consulting at a policy level in climate change and, causes that are near and dear to my heart that I think really matter in this world. And that's very much like a top-down approach. And the works is very grassroots and it's very local. And it's really like this bottom-up approach of just one person at a time, one class at a time. And then that effect gets magnified out in the world as each of those people who come through our doors go forth in whatever way they end up going forth.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a lot of people who come back, like class after class?
Yeah, tons of people who come back. Our number one, we ask, how did you hear about this class? Our number one answer is repeat student, which is amazing to me, that we have so many people who have found us and stayed with us.
Do you think that they are going back and honing the skills that they have developed, or do you think that they're using it as something like a nice thing to do on a Saturday afternoon kind of thing?
I think it's some of both, to be very honest. I think there are definitely people who have a strong DIY streak and know that we provide really high quality programming, and they're coming back. They learned pickling and now they want to learn stitching or knitting or, and they know that we're the place to do that and that we cover this like whole wide range of skills. I also think there are people who are coming back for the community. Not necessarily just because this is a nice thing to do on a Saturday afternoon, but that there is some magic that's happening. We try really hard to create an inclusive environment and break the ice with people. And there's something sort of magical that happens when you're making something hands-on. All of a sudden you are talking to your neighbor, where 10 minutes earlier when you're just sitting and we're kind of, setting the stage and going through some introductions, it feels awkward, and you feel as a teacher, you feel the energy in the room shift as soon as people start making. And so I think that's part of what brings people back too, is to have a place to gather and experience some of that community.
Do you think that because it's a beautiful philosophy and I think it's a great way to live in the world, and I think it is really important that we look at ways to expand our world, our tiny little worlds, rather than having a more narrow focused and being like more shut in. And I don't mean that in a way of like, oh, she's a shut in, but just more like, I think it's really easy just to get comfortable in what we do. And whether that's reading a book in the morning, when we get up in the morning, or reading a book at night, and just getting kind of lazy about things. I guess my wish that for those people, that even if they are just like taking a pickle class and they never make pickles themselves, getting out and expanding their world in that way, I can see huge value in that.
Oh, for sure. And, honestly, I could only guess of, we keep our classes very small. We cap at 15 so that everybody gets hands-on time and everybody gets to kind of have this intimate experience. I think you lose some of the magic when you go bigger. Of those 15 students, I could only guess how many people are actually going to go home to their garden or to the farmer's market and pickle. And I truly think some of them do. And I know that some of them do because I get to hear about their pickles and their pickle creations. And that's amazing for me as a teacher. But I also think that not everyone does. Not all 15 students who are there learning how to pickle are going to go home and pickle this summer. But what they're leaving with is an appreciation for the seasonality of food, where food comes from, the process that goes into making pickles. And so the next time that they're buying pickles at the farmer's market or off the shelf in the grocery store, there's a little connection there
there sure is.
That didn't exist before. And to me, that's just as valuable as the people who are going home and DIYing their pickles.
I had just been looking, this is probably 3 months ago or so, I was looking for a kombucha course in Seattle and I couldn't find anything. I was sure that like the PCC would have one, but they didn't. So I'd been looking around and I didn't see your course. I didn't come across your company, but then someone did send me your information, just like, oh, this might be a good podcast guest. And when I looked into it, I was like, yes, kombucha course. I have to have this woman on. That sounds like a great thing. So I'm just putting it out there. So the next course, I'm out of town, but the next time there is a class, I am all over that class. I'm super excited about it.
Awesome.
So yeah. And knowing that you give a SCOBY during the class.
Yes.
Maybe I can just go clean out my
blank
pantry.
slate.
Just have a blank slate with a nice fresh one. So, your website you have a beautiful website, and it is just it's so clean and so well laid out. It's so easy to navigate. I love just kind of poking around on there. So I want to give you some kudos for that. And I noticed that it's very pretty, and it is, in my opinion, very appealing to a woman, but I don't see anything on there that it makes it women focused necessarily. Mm-hmm. Like that there's you, and that I think, I actually didn't look, but it seems like all the teachers are female. Are they?
Yeah, so we have an in-house staff of 5, and they are all women. But we also have over 30 different makers and artists and chefs and people from around the Seattle area that we partner with, and they come and share their skills with us in the form of classes. And that includes both women and some men.
Okay,
yeah.
I missed that. Mm-hmm. And I did see one photo of a gentleman that I think was like in a class, so there was that representation.
Oh, I have so many thoughts on this. The Works is a place for everyone. And we actually it never occurred to me when I was first starting this business to ever even consider, and I am a woman. It never occurred to me to create a women-centric business. I created a business that I thought was providing this sort of service in the community that didn't otherwise exist in this format, and following my own passions, quite frankly. And it just never dawned on me until we really started ramping up. And then I had this moment of like, all of our students are women. And as we've expanded and added additional programming, the core of what we do attracts women, but some of our classes are very much 50-50. Pickling actually is one of them. That's our number one class at the shop. Seattle loves pickles. Yeah.
I was wondering, she keeps bringing up pickles. Why is she bringing up pickles?
She's got pickles on the brain.
So seriously, why pickles? Do you have any sense why that's a big thing?
Well, I have a guess, and that's all it is. It's just a hypothesis. I think Seattle's a foodie town, and people like pickles. It provides that sour crunch. They're using pickles in all kinds of different formats. And I think that there is this reverence for these time-honored traditions. And most people have someone in their family who previously made pickles. And it's like, they don't do it anymore, or they never learned how, and that person's, back in Indiana or whatever. And so I think it just hits a couple different sweet spots in terms of it's the DIY, it's the food thing, and it's like this craft, I don't know. The people of Seattle, tell me why you love pickles so much.
Yes, please let us know.
But I'm very happy to be the pickle provider. So classes like that, coffee classes, some of the cooking classes.
What do you do in the coffee class?
We do both tasting and brew methods. Yeah. Those sorts of classes tend to draw more men. To answer your other question about have we considered being really a women-centric business, I have considered it, because just watching what has happened with the dynamic of our classes, and I've very intentionally made a decision to not be a woman-centric business. I am a woman business owner. I happen to employ women on my team. Every time we put a new job out, we always encourage all people to apply. It just is pure coincidence that the best candidates have been women. That being said, I think it tends to be women who create time and space in their lives to and value these types of experiences. Not that men don't. I think women are just natural connectors, natural seekers. Some of the men that we get coming to classes are coming with their women, which is very interesting to me. And so I think that's part of what
I don't think you meant coming with their women, before anyone gets offended by what you just said.
It's women bringing their men.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. But what
somebody
I mean.
will be upset. Yeah.
Yeah. It's women who are the catalyst to, whether they're getting just coming solo, getting a group of their girlfriends together and learning something together, or bringing their partners who happen to be men. I think that that's something culturally about being a woman, and what we're doing at the Works resonates with women, but men are very welcome too.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when I think of like makers, right? Because you've mentioned that word, think of that word makers in a bigger context. Not that I think about it in terms of your business, but I think makers to me in the context that I've heard it is like you go to a maker's workshop and you do technology, or you do, it's only because the people that I know who've done things like that are men, where they've gone to a maker's class and they're doing kind of hands-on like metal working or something like that, where I think it is maybe a little bit more attractive to men, or more technology. And again, people are going to say women, there's plenty of women who are doing that, but that's just like, that's been my experience. And so whether it's the things that it seems like many of the things that you're doing are traditionally more female centric, like things in the kitchen, or like you said, sewing, like being able to repair your jeans. I can't see a guy going to a class, like just in general, I can't see a guy going to a class to figure out how to fix his jeans.
And yet the last class we had that was visible mending, there was a guy there all by himself.
Well, right.
Defying stereotypes.
Right. One out of how many?
Yeah,
though,
one out
right.
of,
right.
12 or 15.
Because they're just going to wear their jeans with their holes in it. Like, that's my perspective on it. Oh, I don't know. I feel like I'm digging a hole and going to get in trouble for stuff. But anyway, yeah, so I don't know. But anyway, I think it's great that you are all inclusive. And I think it's fabulous that there are men who are out there doing that, maybe less traditional things. And what the heck with the pickles? I still can't quite get over that. I wouldn't have thought that. I would think like people are out doing craft brewing or learning how to distill vodka or something, taking those kinds of classes.
Maybe they're doing that
rather than the pickling. Yeah. But that's just, again, I'm not a big foodie myself. And so there's that whole perspective that I'm out of touch with that kind of thing. So like, I just don't have any idea. You used a word when you were describing the classes. You said something about when you've seen the dynamics as opposed to all female, that there's a different dynamic there.
No, I don't feel like it's a different dynamic. And that's an interesting question. I think I was just referring to like me stepping back for a moment and making this observation of like, oh, well, up to this point, 90% of our classes have been women. But interestingly, the dynamic doesn't change. And we go out of our way to create a very welcoming environment. And, it may sound dorky, but we do always do some sort of icebreaker introduction around the table. And I think it brings people back to some awkward place from high school or college maybe, but icebreakers work. And then as soon as we start creating, whether we are filling our jar of to be pickles or crafting in some way or tasting coffee or whatever it is, the ice is already broken and like the room just lights up. Maybe that's what I was referring to, is like there is this, people arrive 5 or 10 minutes early, and there's kind of like this, the energy that you feel in the space is like, a little bit not tense, but like a little, everybody's kind of, especially if you come by yourself, you're kind of like, it's, you're not really sure where you want to sit. And, we have a small retail shop full of everything in the retail shop is by a local maker. And so there's kind of some places to move around and, have something to look at, but, it's quiet in there. And then as soon as we start, it's loud, and as a teacher, then you kind of have to get people back together to talk about the next step or whatever it is. And you really have to command that room. So that's very interesting. And I don't feel that dynamic is different if it's women or men or both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I do tours, I run tours, and I do a lot of women only tours, and occasionally I run co-ed trips when John, my husband, wants to go, or when it's just something that I don't think I can fill as a woman-only tour. And I do notice the difference in dynamics with it. Just slightly different conversation. And I think, I'm talking about something that happens over maybe a 12-day time period, not a 2-hour or 4-hour time period. So there is more getting to know you and a bit more conversation that's going on. So I do notice that a little bit, and not in a negative way at all. And I don't, like, I think some people look at women only situations where, and I've been told this, I wouldn't want to go on a women only tour because it's like there's the women are catty, or they're fighting for the best seat, or they're doing this or that. And I don't see that, I don't experience that. There's probably just not enough time for that to develop there. So you got into your business. I know you kind of maybe slid into it. It wasn't like, I have this idea and I'm going to go create this business. Can you talk about kind of your previous life that you mentioned that you were working in environmental work? Can you talk about what that was, and then kind of what precipitated, what happened, and then how you got into actually the works?
Absolutely. I going to go in the Wayback Machine. I had an opportunity as a sixth grader to go to environmental camp. I grew up on the East Coast and in New Hampshire, and my whole class got to go to environmental camp in Maine. And one of the activities we did was like, you're out in the woods, you're doing everything hands-on, which is an interesting tie back, right, to now my life of hands-on. And you had to sort all these different items of quote unquote litter into how quickly they'll decompose in the environment. And glass doesn't really decompose. And I just had this light bulb moment as a sixth grader out in the woods of like, oh my gosh, what does that mean for the environment? And so I was the weird kid who like followed this passion. And I knew as a 16, 17-year-old when I was looking at colleges that I wanted to go into the environmental field. And so kids go to college for a lot of different reasons and you pick for a lot of different reasons. I researched colleges that had a good environmental program. And I ended up going to college in Maine. My undergraduate degree is in environmental policy, which is sort of an interdisciplinary degree that's got some science and some economics and some policy government work, and kind of ties it all together. And I went from college to a job in environmental education. So teaching exactly what my sixth grade experience was, except now I'm on the teacher side. Yeah. And I loved the job, but I hit a ceiling there so quickly. And there just wasn't an opportunity for me to continue to grow. And
where was that work?
Kentucky. Isn't that crazy? When
that is crazy.
When you graduate from college and you say, I'm willing to move anywhere, that's how you end up in Appalachian, Kentucky, which I will say was the kindest, most welcoming people. But that was a hard place to live as a 22-year-old. But more than that, I hit a ceiling in that job, and I had no opportunities to continue to learn and continue to grow. And that I found that stifling. And so I moved back to New England after a year doing environmental education. And I was trying to figure out my next thing. I was still very young.
So you moved back without a job?
I moved back without a job. I moved back with a boyfriend, but without a job. The boyfriend actually from college who had come to Kentucky with me, which is an even crazier leap than my own.
So even having someone there that you knew, it still just wasn't the environment for you.
Yeah. Yeah. There were not very many young people. The young people had all left.
Where in Kentucky was it?
It was called Hazard County, and the town was Harlan. So it's just culturally like totally different environment. Very, very good, kind people, huge opportunity to work with the youth there. But it was just the same thing day in, day out, So yeah, we moved back to New England, and he was a teacher. So he got a job at a private school in Massachusetts, and I went, and I was just trying to piece together my next thing. And you know how that is, especially when you're young, but really at any point in your career, you cast a wide net, you put out a lot of resumes and cover letters. I just told myself I'm open. Here I am again.
In the days of resumes and cover letters.
Right. I'm open to anything, I had applied to some consulting jobs, environmental consulting, with hesitation in my gut. But, I always say to myself, and I really would say this to anybody, like, until you should never turn down an interview, because it's always a good experience, regardless of what comes out of it. And you don't really have to decide until somebody makes you a job offer. And at that point, that's your moment of reckoning. Your moment of reckoning is not when you're searching job listings, right? Like, don't be so selective at that point. So anyway, that's how you first end up in Kentucky. And secondly, end up in consulting when you've come from a nonprofit background and really value the work of nonprofits. And I had to go through this whole shift with myself of like, what does it mean for me to join a publicly traded company that is doing good work in climate change and sustainability, where you can earn a good living, but aren't I supposed to always be poor and like scrapping this together? And grassroots on the ground. So that was a very interesting shift. And honestly, if I had had my moment of reckoning when I was selecting jobs, I probably never would have applied. But instead, I got to have my moment of reckoning after I had interviewed with them and realized what good work they were doing and having them make me a job offer. So I went to work in environmental consulting, and I did that for the next 10 years.
Where were you based then?
I was based in Providence, Rhode Island.
And was the boyfriend out of the picture at that point? He was in Massachusetts.
We were still together, and then we split. And it was the nicest breakup I've ever had. And we parted ways, and that was all fine. I worked with them in Providence for another 6 or 7 years. And then I ultimately transferred with the same company out to their office in Seattle. And so that's
what brought you out here.
Yeah. And I met the man who became my husband in Providence, and we got married and we moved out here in the same year, which was in 2012. So yeah, that job took me, at the time when I accepted that job, I thought it was just going to be a stepping stone to the next thing. I ended up staying there for a decade and growing within that company and doing a lot of really good work and learning the ropes of consulting and all of this. And it facilitated a move for me Matt and I really wanted to be on the West Coast. So this was a very intentional move. People would ask us, why did you move to Seattle? Did your work make you move? Make you is a very interesting phrase. And
people who live here say that?
People who live back east.
Okay, yeah.
And the answer was like, no, we're moving to Seattle because it's where we think we want to live. We're going to go try it. Now we're here. We're never leaving. Yeah. Anyway, the work that I did was in climate change and sustainability and working with a number of different clients over the years and really affecting change at that policy level. As I grew within the company and, my title was a research assistant. I was 23, and I moved through the ranks there, so to speak, the corporate sort of levels very quickly. It's definitely the kind of place where your hard work is recognized, the above and beyond is recognized, you are rewarded for that. And I was that kind of person where I really wanted to continue to learn and also to achieve. And so I was one of their youngest directors this feels blurry now, but looking back on it, I was probably 30 or 31. And that felt like a huge accomplishment. And to be very honest with you, at the same time, my heart wasn't in it anymore. As I had gotten more senior, there was just, more work and more travel and more layers between the actual work that felt like it mattered and what I was doing on my day-to-day basis. And I wasn't passionate about it anymore. And I sort of knew that I needed to make a change, but I didn't know what to do. Do I go work for another consulting firm doing the same thing? It feels like the same thing, different place. And on a personal note, I have Crohn's disease, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's the year after I graduated from college. So I was actually in Kentucky, which is a whole other story and experience. Crohn's is an autoimmune disease, and I've been able for the better part of my adult life to manage that condition through diet and acupuncture and stress management and all of those sorts of things. And I just noticed in my corporate job, as my heart wasn't in it and as the grind continued of very long weeks and travel and all these things, that my health was suffering. And I knew it.
So as you were not feeling as happy in your job, the symptoms of the Crohn's disease were more inflammatory. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's a happiness factor, but it's also stress, and how stress registers in the body, and I knew it, but it's interesting. Like we get set in our ways, and it's very hard to make a change, especially when you're thinking about careers and salaries and these sorts of things. And I just felt very stuck. And so I just kept going because it seemed like the best plan at the time. Even
feeling ill.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to talk about women a lot, on this podcast and just in this specific conversation. I think women, in my experience, no offense, men, I think women have a pretty high propensity to just grin and bear it, so to speak, and to push through pain. And I'm certainly not unique in that. But as I've gotten older, I've really tried to check myself on some of that stuff of like, hey, maybe you should rest instead of just pushing through,
Why do you think we do that?
I don't know. Do you think that's a thing or is it just me?
No, I do think that we do that. I mean, we joke that men are babies, right?
Like the man cold.
Yes, exactly. And it's probably a joke for a reason, but I think that I haven't given this a ton of thought, but if I had to reflect on it right now, I would say we are responsible for so many things that there is not time to sit down and take care of ourselves. And there's the house and the kids and just having to take on so many things all at once. And so I think we push through it for that reason. I think it's as simple as that, as simple and as complicated as that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the fact that women have a monthly cycle is also a part of that factor, and that our bodies are changing all of the time. And sometimes that comes with pain or bleeding or inconvenience, and that you don't stay home. You keep going. And that's something that you experience from a pretty young age in the grand scheme of human life, right? Like 12 right? And so I think you just internalize, like, I just keep going. I don't know. Maybe that's a very strange thing to say, but I think that's a part of it.
Yeah. I had never thought of it in that way. And you think of childbirth too. It's like, suck it up, like you're not getting out of that one. If you're pregnant, you're not going to get out of actually having the kid. There's going to be a lot of pain involved there. So you just have to get through it.
And these are like truths that as a woman from a very young age before you even start to think about having an actual family. You just kind of always know that, like, if I do want to have a family someday, I will probably be pregnant and I will probably give birth. And that's my life as a woman.
Yeah. I guess if coming from the other perspective, though, I could see how a man would say, well, wait a minute, like, we're not allowed to cry. So we're the ones who are sucking it up too and just being the strong ones. I don't know that they're enduring pain like you're talking about. Like, I'm just going to stick with this job and I'm not going to like it. I think actually, now that I'm talking this through, I think another part of it is the lack of confidence that I am going to stay in this situation because I'm afraid to leave. And I'm not talking specifically about your job. I'm talking about, like, maybe in a relationship. I'm staying in a relationship because I'm afraid to leave. I don't have the confidence. I don't know if I can make it on my own, type of thing. And I think there's probably a lot more of that than there is just, I'm used to pain, so I'm going to stick with it. I bet there's a lack of confidence in there that is a strong player.
Yeah. And I think, for men, they have a whole other set of experiences and cultural expectations that they're raised with. And they might choose to stay in a job that's not feeding their soul, that becomes a grind and a grind and a grind because of, pressure to be a provider and all of those things. But yeah, I know for sure about myself that I have a higher propensity for pain and a strong ability to just keep going. And so getting to kind of the punchline of this story is I did just keep going. And then next thing I knew, I was quite sick and I was facing GI surgery, which is not a laughing matter. And at that point, I decided to take some time off of work just to go on short-term disability. I was still really hoping to avoid having surgery, and I needed to just have some time and space to really understand my health situation and make some decisions and figure out alternatives to surgery or what surgery entailed and all of those things. And so I went on leave from work. We went camping for the weekend, which is something that we love to do. I actually felt this tremendous weight come off of me, and we had a fabulous weekend. Came home from that, and honestly, my husband Matt would remember the timing better than me because I'm sure it's a very sharp memory for him. But within days of that, ended up with a fever, feeling really bad, just kind of riding it out on the couch. And you can only ride out a fever on the couch without a lot of food and water for so many days before you end up in the hospital. And so I ended up in the hospital, and I was in the situation of just a major Crohn's flare up, tons of inflammation, everything, just a whole system out of whack. And I was in the hospital for almost 3 weeks.
Wow.
I was actually in one hospital for a couple of weeks. I was discharged and home for a few days and relapsed and back into a different hospital for another week or so. And that was when I realized I don't know what I'm going to do from here, but I'm not going to go back to work. Not to that job.
Right.
And, I worked with fabulous people. I'm still in touch with a lot of them. And I loved that aspect of my work. I loved the work that we were doing collectively in the climate change and sustainability space. But my particular day-to-day experience in that job wasn't working for me. And it's a huge privilege to be able to say, like, well, I'm not going to do that anymore, and some of it takes having a partner who's got your back and having health insurance and all of those things that we sometimes take for granted. But the only thing I knew from that hospital bed was I'm really sick right now, and I'm not going to do that again. And that was sort of the bottom that then I have climbed back out of, which ultimately in a long and winding road has led me to the works.
Do you think that we have to hit bottom before we can make those kinds of decisions?
I wish in retrospect that I had been able to create just a little more space in my day-to-day life to really be honest with myself about how things were steadily declining in my health, and to have that moment of truth with myself to say, even if you don't know what it is, what the next thing is, you need to make a change right now because you're going to hit bottom if you don't. And so should a situation like that, it's like hindsight is always 20/20, right? So it's easy to reflect on, but I try to be more in tune with that, with myself going forward. So I don't know the answer to your question. I think a lot of us do hit bottom and then you climb back out. But
do you think you've learned your lesson?
Ask me in 50 years. I think so. But it's also, life happens fast and you go day in, day out and you got to buy groceries. And sometimes it's hard to create that space. But I think to me, that's the magic ticket, is having the time and space in your day-to-day life to have those reflections and those conversations with yourself while you're in the moment, as opposed to waiting for something catastrophic to happen.
Knowing the warning signs. I think it's really difficult to know whether you're pushing yourself too hard or just the right amount.
Yeah.
Or if you don't push yourself to the edge, then are you trying hard enough? And I think that there's some cultural stuff going on there where there's a tremendous amount of pressure in the United States to be a certain way, to succeed a certain way, or to fail a certain way, and to pick yourself back up. And there's a lot of beauty in all of that. I think it makes us successful business people, and entrepreneurs having our own businesses. But I think it is a really delicate balance and something difficult to, I think sometimes you do need to kind of tip the balance way too far to one side before you can figure out that didn't quite work for you.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's you don't want to lose your health. You don't want to lose your health because of that. That's a big thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fairly young in the grand scheme of things, and most people, I was diagnosed with Crohn's when I was in my 20s and lived with it all through my 20s, and now I'm in my 30s. Most people who are in their 20s and 30s, health is not on your radar. In your 20s, I think we think we're invincible. In our 30s, we're a little bit more grounded, but for the most part, people still have good health. And for me, health is a daily consideration, and it's the number one thing that I value.
You're making every choice based on that.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is something that will be with you forever. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not going to magically wake up in a week and say, oh gosh, everything's quote unquote back to normal.
No, this is a chronic condition, so it's there forever. Although the science has come a long way, even just in the last 10 years. This is maybe random and certainly on a personal note, but we did have the opportunity to bank our baby's cord blood cells. So who knows? Who knows, how the science will continue to evolve.
For what purpose?
With stem cell research and the ability, and this is way over my head, but there is emerging science about being able to use cord blood and cord blood tissue to help in my case, mama, with this type of autoimmune condition.
Oh, so it might be able to help you in the
and it might
future.
be able to also help my kiddos if one of them ever had some form of cancer or something like that. So it just seemed like, hey,
Yeah, well, why not?
We only have this opportunity once.
Yeah.
So let's try to collect this blood and tissue if we can. But yeah, so we'll see. But for right now, for the foreseeable future, this is my life. This is my life every day.
Yeah. What do you eat? I mean, I'm assuming I know I'm thinking that food is the biggest thing.
Yes.
But then the stressor is having stress in your life, reducing the amount of stress in your life is the other thing. But so what does your daily food intake look like?
I eat a lot of things. I primarily eat meat and vegetables. So what people would think of as like a paleo diet. I've experimented with a lot of different diets and a lot of different foods, and I've had a lot of time to do that. And where I've landed with it is just, you can call something paleo, you can call something the autoimmune protocol, you can do low FODMAP, you can do all these different diets. Let's just all collectively agree that we don't need to be black and white about anything. And it's okay to follow a paleo diet, but that you also eat XYZ on the
An
side.
apple.
And you find that goes fine for you. So my diet these days is a total amalgamation of lots of different trial and error. But yeah, we mostly, I eat real food. And
So very little to no processed food.
yeah, but also I have a tremendous amount of discipline in my life, but I don't stress about it. So, we're going up to Mount Baker tomorrow to spend, some time away with family and get our dog to get to go swimming. And, I went to Trader Joe's and I bought some snacks and that's okay for me. And that's okay. It's just making the best decisions that you can for yourself. And so my diet doesn't easily fit into a box, but for the most part, I eat meat and fish and vegetables. And
so you're not going to completely pay for it if you have, can you eat nuts? Mm-hmm. Okay. So a fig bar or a bag of chips, you're not going to have a complete flare up and a miserable time. Mm-hmm.
No, it's more of a longer term. I'm on a longer term basis thinking about inflammation. And so it's less of like a direct cause and effect. There's certain things that any of us could eat that would have a direct cause and effect. But for me, the primary things that I try to avoid in my diet are gluten and grains. But that being said, don't judge me. Sometimes I have a bagel on a Saturday and that's okay. I just shouldn't have a bagel every day, which I'm not sure anybody should have a bagel every day. And interestingly, I've developed an allergy to eggs in my adult life. And I use the word allergy because it's certainly the easiest way to describe it to people, but it's actually more of just an intolerance in terms of, you think about leaky gut and the gut membrane and, how the body responds to different things. I just absolutely cannot digest eggs or anything that contains eggs, which includes mayonnaise and salad dressings and
cakes,
different baked goods. And it's a real drag, but it's also just that is very black and white for me. Everything else is shades of gray. That is very black and white. It has to be very black and white. And it's just been, it's been okay to adapt to. And do I wish that I could eat anything? Do I wish that I could show up at a potluck and not have to be the person asking, of course I do. But it's also
making sure you're bringing your own quinoa salad or whatever it is, your kale salad.
For sure. Yeah. And the fact that my kiddos, they're 8 months old, they're eating all kinds of foods and they're just healthy and happy. And that's all anyone would ever wish for their kids. But as an adult, having gone through so many different health challenges and, and infertility on top of it, just to see them healthy and happy and they can eat eggs, that's okay that mom can't, The food thing and diet as medicine is what started me growing my own food, which is partly what led me to teaching classes.
So let's get back to that.
Yeah.
Come around to that. So didn't go back to your job. You started teaching. Were you teaching pickling?
I started actually doing a lot. So it actually took me quite some time to recover my health enough to even do anything.
Like how long?
Like 3 to 6 months.
Okay. Wow.
Like it was a solid 6 months before I was.
And during that time, you weren't bedridden, but you were just not feeling
I
good.
was not bedridden. So I lost 50 pounds.
Whoa.
Yeah. I was very small.
You just couldn't keep anything down.
Yeah, it just happened over time. And then most of it happened in the hospital. The first thing they do when a Crohn's patient walks into the hospital is they put you on liquids only. So that's a good diet plan for anybody. But yeah, so I was trying to regain weight and therefore energy, because it's not just what we feed ourselves, but everything that they measure in a blood panel was low. Iron was low, B12 was low, whatever,
Right. So you're
all
missing nutrients. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't just rebuild those overnight, And so, I did some IV nutrition. I was doing iron infusions. I was doing all these things. So I spent a lot of time going to the doctor. I spent a lot of time laying low around the house, just reading and occasionally watching The Price is Right, because, haven't done that since I was like homesick from high school, and poking around in my garden a little bit, and things like that. It was a long road. Yeah. I felt very lucky to not have to go back to work, to keep my house and put food on the table. And I mean, it was from a different set of circumstances. Like, that's how people end up homeless. Like it could have been a very different story.
Did you think it would just never end?
No, I am an eternal optimist. I don't know where I get it from. I knew that there was another side. I knew that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, but I also knew very realistically that it was going to be a long road. And the fact of the matter is that health, quote unquote, crash, which is how I refer to it, how I think of it, which maybe is a negative thing, but for sure, like the bottom of the barrel, that was, 3-4 years ago now. And I'm just getting back to full Kellie. So it was 3 to 6 months of real recovery time before I even started to think about what am I going to do? And after about 6 months, I would say that I was at 75 or 80%, which is pretty good when you've been at like 10 or 20%.
Sure.
But it's not the same as being at 100%. And so honestly, I opened a lot of doors. I did a lot of freelance work. I did some consulting. I co-hosted a podcast. I just started going out into the world and exploring. And that's also when I started thinking like, oh, could I share I call them grandma skills, which is meant with great respect and reverence for all the grandmas of the world. But like most 30-something-year-olds aren't out growing food and canning pickles or knitting but I was. And I think that's how I started connecting with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what was the first class that you taught? So you discovered it wasn't called The Works at that time. It was called
Seattle Farm School. Seattle Farm School is an organization that existed starting in 2014. So I was a couple years into Seattle. I was looking for, and this is an interesting thread, looking for a community to connect with. And I had started growing my own food. And this is before my crash, right? But I was thinking a lot about where our food comes from, what we put into our bodies, those sorts of things. And I thought, this is crazy. I should grow some of my own food. And also I should note, when we moved to Seattle, we were living in the Ballard neighborhood before we bought our house in West Seattle. And we moved here in September, and I just remember seeing all of the parking strips, which is, that space between the sidewalk and the street, full of cherry tomatoes. Specifically, I know there was other food there, but the cherry tomatoes during September, they blew me away. I would walk the dog around and I was just like, what is this place where we have moved to? And so I'd never had a garden before, but then we bought our house later that year, I was like, I got to have a garden. And so it was partly spurred on by the people of Seattle and partly spurred on by my own questioning of like, yeah, the food that we put into our bodies matters. So yeah, I had gotten really passionate about growing food and starting seeds and how to lay out a garden in the city for maximum effectiveness, like maximum yield. And I found this organization, Seattle Farm School, and I became one of their first teachers. Not for the money. I was still doing my consulting, environmental consulting gig full time, but just to be a part of the community and to share my skills with others. And so when I was in this process of, crashing and rebuilding and knowing that I didn't want to go back to my consulting thing full time, I thought a lot about like, what do I want to do? Which is, by the way, like not to make lemons out of lemonade, but that's a really unique opportunity to be able to say like, what do I want to do from here? Blank slate, And I just kept thinking about like, I love this. I love growing food. I love preserving food. I love knitting and crafting and creating. And so I approached the owner at the time of Seattle Farm School, who I had become friends with over the last couple of years. I was teaching like once a month or once every couple months. And I approached her and just said, hey, what do you think about working together? And she welcomed me into the business at that point. And so this was in 2017.
So you were part owner at that point when you say welcome into the business?
Yeah, we were 50-50 partners, and we were a great team. I had this strong operations background from consulting. She was so ambitious and full of ideas. And, I took this business and I just started popping up around Seattle, partnering with other small businesses to bring this kind of programming to their space. Interestingly, one of the businesses where I was popping up was Seattle Seed Company, which I don't know if you know them, but a local organic, non-GMO seed company. They also had a home and garden store on the south end of Capitol Hill. And I would come there and I would teach gardening classes featuring their seeds. It was like a perfect win-win for everybody. And that's another business owner that I became friends with over the years. So fast forward to a year after joining Seattle Farm School, I had really built a lot, and my business partner, more power to her, had added a third baby to her family. And, running a small business.
Little did you know.
Right. Little did I know. Running a small business is a tremendous amount of work, and their family moved to Puyallup, which is, not that far, but it's maybe 45 minutes or so south of the city. It's one thing to be a mom of 3 kids. It's another thing to try to run a business in Seattle. And she was just ready to move on. So I purchased her share of the business and knew that I wanted to keep going. And so that was really a turning point for me. I rebranded us as The Works the very next month. So this was a year ago now in May. And I chose the name The Works to kind of reflect that, yes, right now we have these farming roots, urban farming, how to grow food in the city. There's so much more we can do that goes beyond the farm. I didn't know quite what it was yet, but I knew that there was something that really this business was about bringing people together and creating, and it didn't necessarily have to be urban farming. And so I was off to the races. So that was May of 2018. And it just kind of exploded, huh? It just kind of exploded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly.
So for some reason, it's resonating.
It's definitely resonating. And interestingly, going back to kind of what you asked me in the beginning there was, so you were pregnant when this business was taking off. And interestingly, so now like filling in the blanks on the background is my former business partner was like making the decision to leave. And I was making my decision to like, are we just going to close shop and say like, this was a good run, or am I going to take this thing and like really go for it? We were making that decision. And by we, I mean, really like me and my husband, he's a huge supporter and bouncer of ideas and all of this stuff during the exact time when we were transferring our embryos into Jacqueline. And so that's kind of a crazy, surreal experience. And Matt and I had a lot of conversations about like, what is it going to mean that we have as a family this infant business with 2 infant babies.
Mm-hmm. And he works full-time somewhere else. He's
does.
Not working full-time with you.
No. He works full-time somewhere else. And, but he is just as much a part of the works as anyone, including being the guy who paints the walls. And, we're a family business. We don't have a big fancy investors and,
So what's your stress level now compared to at the tail end of your job before you got sick?
It's so interesting. And I talk about this with friends because I've been for a solid year now working at least 12 hours a day, almost 7 days a week, including through when my kids were born. And I very much recognize the privilege of having someone else carry my babies for me. Believe me, if I could have carried those babies, I would have. And that's something that is a void for me that I will probably mourn for the rest of my life. But it also, the fact that that's the way it happened meant that our kids were born in Portland. We live in Seattle. I was running the business from the hospital room at night when the kids were sleeping, which is a very different sort of postpartum experience than when you're the actual one who's having gone through labor and delivery. But yeah, it's been a tremendous push for the last year. I have worked more now than I ever did in my consulting job. And I thought my consulting job was crazy.
But what about, okay.
Yeah. But the way that it registers in my life and my happiness and my stress levels and my body is entirely different.
Isn't that crazy?
And it's amazing to me. It's amazing because it's not about the number of hours. And I will be the first to say that I have someone new starting at the business next week. And a lot of that is in an effort, like we're growing like crazy, and it's in an effort to free up some of my time and also allow me to be operating from a more strategic place. And so I'm looking forward to having more balance. I am not wearing it like a badge of honor that I'm putting in these crazy hours. My family would also like to see me more, and I would like to see them. But I will say that that's what the business has required for the last year, to really roll up your sleeves and get it done. And because I have so much passion for it, it doesn't make it not work, but it fuels me in an entirely different way.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? I think about this a lot, about mental energy, emotional energy, and how much that plays a part on our physical, not only our physical health, but the amount of energy that we have physically. And there's a couple things. So I had this job like 12 years ago that I hated, and paid great money, but it's kind of like, that's the job that if I didn't have that job, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't be running tours and doing all these other great things. But at that job, I had to get up at 5:15 every morning, and because I had to be at work at 7, and it was down in Renton, and it was miserable. When that alarm went off, I couldn't stand it. It was just like it dragging my feet, to get me out the door and onto my little commute. Now I am up, bright and chipper at that same time. Sometimes I wake up earlier than 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm excited to start my day. And it's so different. I think back to that, of how I did not want to drag myself out, and it's just out of bed. And it's just really interesting to me that, like, that's just a really good example of that. I think a lot of people can understand, but it's the same thing with you. It's like when you're working at a job that's mentally draining, no matter how great that job might have been, just like from the outside, that it just wasn't your thing. At that time, it wasn't your thing.
Yeah. And no amount of money in the world is a substitute for that.
No, it's not. No.
Yeah.
And that's like, even though I was making a ton of money at that point, and that's why I didn't want to walk away from it. And, my yearly quote unquote salary went down after that. The amount of happiness, it made up for the loss of the actual income there. And it's a lifestyle business. I mean, yours is probably a little bit lifestyle business plus, like a little bit more, but I have a lifestyle business that I can control, and and it makes for a great life.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate, like you've expressed your gratitude. I feel very fortunate to be in the position I am.
Yeah. And if only we could all be so lucky,
But we can.
Yeah.
I think that we can. I do believe that.
Yeah.
Because look at the bus driver. There is a bus driver who is cranky and barely saying hello to people, and grumpy, and having a terrible day, and passing that on to everybody else. And there's another bus driver who's saying, "How you doing today? This is the next stop that's coming up. Let me tell you about this stop. This is the corner. This is my favorite corner in Seattle, and I love this. And we're coming up on Pike Place Market." And it's a completely different experience. We can all be that bus driver. It's just a matter of attitude and finding the right fit, making the right fit. I think we can do that.
I agree with you in that, in terms of like creating that life that we want. I also think, I would encourage all of my friends and family to like try to carve out that space to really reflect on like, where do you want to be and what makes your heart sing? And if that's not your current 9 to 5 or whatever your employment is, what are some steps you can take along the way to make a shift? And maybe that's just, I'm going to volunteer at XYZ organization on my weekends, or I'm going to start doing this after work. And I realize that not everyone can just take a step off of, their current full-time employment and start up a business, right?
But there's the term side hustle now. Everybody talks about it. You can have a side hustle, and maybe that side hustle starts with making pickles, or being able to mend your jeans and your friends' jeans and having a little business like that. Yeah. I mean, really, there's so much opportunity, especially with the internet, and connecting online, being able to connect online. I think there's a lot of opportunities for people.
Yeah. And so just not holding yourself back, having that openness and seeing how the dots start to connect, and like, you can't write your story in forward motion. The dots only make sense when you look back and connect them. But you can be open and you can really know what those passions are and just start opening doors and seeing where it leads. And you might be surprised. And I only say that, and I don't mean at all to come across as preachy, but that's advice I wish I had given myself, 5 years ago when I was still doing my daily grind, because there's so much more out there. And my life is so different now, not only because I have 2 kids, but even without them, just in terms of like my day to day, my daily experience, the people that I know in this town, as a result of my work, it's such a different experience. And I wish that for anyone who wants it.
One of the things that I observe is that you may have been doing kind of quote unquote service work previously because you were working in environmental work, which I think is very noble, but you're doing very much like service work. You are helping people improve their lives and connect with each other and learn a skill. So there has to be I would imagine there's a lot of gratification in that, of just feeling good about what you do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't spend a ton of time thinking about that. But what's most gratifying for me is when students who have come to a class come back and say, I planted blah, blah, blah in my garden, or here's how my pickles turned out, or look, I made this macrame. That like makes my heart sing. But in the moment, I should be more in touch in the moment with like, yeah, I get so caught up in the day-to-day of the business, but in the moment it's like, yeah, look at this magic, look at these people who are showing up for themselves and for others. And
it is magic. Is there anything else that you want to cover today? I think it's kind of fun. I think that I think the lesson here, or kind of the thoughts around this, is that what I love about the works is that it gets people out and it gets people thinking creatively, gets the juices flowing. And I think we can get really settled in our ways and set in our ways. And it's really easy to be lazy. And that's like speaking from experience. I know that. The inertia can really set in. And I think what you're providing is an awesome opportunity for people to get out. And right now the works is in Seattle. Hopefully you have plans to expand beyond.
Yeah, I have a grand vision for the works. And it's just amazing how really just in the last year to go from being really like a one-woman pop-up, partnering with these other small businesses, to like having a brick and mortar location, to doubling its size and adding retail that's focused entirely on local makers, to all of these different partnerships that we've done. It's very interesting to reflect on like, wow, what a year. And also adding these 2 amazing kids into the mix, right? I can only imagine a year from now how much further we will be. And if all we ever do is create this amazing space in Seattle, that will be a beautiful thing. And there is a balance for me personally. And this is actually very hard for me to admit, because I want to always push. I want to push to the edge. I want to do all the things. I want to push my body physically to the edge. And like, that's just not the right thing for me. And there's some pride and ego tied up in that. But, my personal goal is to create a space that matters, that is a place for Seattleites and people from the region to gather and connect and learn, skills and be creative and to have a good life with my family. Selfishly, but I really think that what we're doing at The Works goes beyond just the community of Seattle. And I think it works in urban environments probably all over this country. And so we'll see how big of an empire we end up building. But, for now, we're 1 year into proving the concept in Seattle and getting a lot of our systems and curriculum in place and all of those sorts of things. And there's like the day-to-day plan, there's the 1 year plan, the 5-year plan, the 20-year plan. We'll see. It's a balance for me personally of fierce ambition, but also, a measured reality of let's not have another health crash and land in the hospital, which I don't foresee happening and I don't live in fear of, but it's a check for me of like that, the earlier when we talked about like, do you have to have a crash? It's like, well, I don't need to have another crash. And so having that more regular check-in with myself about like, where am I at? Where are we at with all these things? Yeah. So as a business owner, that's tremendous freedom because I'm in the driver's seat, but it's also a balance for me of like push, go, do all of the things versus like, you know what? I'm going to take my kids to the aquarium today on a Thursday because I can. Constant struggle for me, but in the best possible way. So we'll see how The Works continues to grow. But for sure, we're here in Seattle and we're here to stay and, to make this beautiful space.
And for people who aren't listening, who are outside of Seattle, this would be just an encouragement to go take a course somewhere, take a class somewhere and just expand yourself and connect. Go into it thinking that you're going to connect and then you will.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes if we just change our mindset a little bit and we think, I'm going to go into this and I'm going to find some new friendships, then you will.
Yeah. And the experience economy is real. I think people are really valuing experiences in many cases over things. And I see that again and again. And I think that's probably true for anyone who's listening, wherever they are, at least in this country. And so there have to be lots of different opportunities to do that in whatever form that takes,
I like to end these episodes by asking what it means to you to be bold. And you just used a term that I absolutely loved. You said fierce ambition. And I think that's wonderful. To me, that kind of goes right in with being bold. So what does it mean to you to be bold or to have that fierce ambition?
Yeah, what it means for me to be bold is to follow your passions and very intentionally create the life you want, which in my case actually comes with a dose of let's scale this back a little bit. And so balancing that ambition, that fire in my belly that I was born with also making sure that there's time for play and fun and rest and putting more value on those sorts of things and not apologizing for that. We talked about there's so many cultural expectations and these things that we feel that we should measure up to. I think being bold is acknowledging those things and saying, I don't have to do that. And that's been a lesson for me in my 30s that I couldn't have understood in my 20s, but that's where I'm at now with being bold.
And where can people find you, connect with you?
Well, our website is theworksseattle.com, and we're on Instagram and on Facebook, but Instagram is our most favorite of channels, just at theworks.seattle, or on Facebook at theworksseattle.
Great. And I'll link to all those in the show notes. Kellie, thank you so much for being here. Neighbor. Just, now that we know we're neighbors, I'm sure we'll see each other at Trader Joe's.
Right. I should have ridden my bike here, but it was a little drizzly this morning and I was not dressed properly.
No, that's totally fine. I like your uniform, as you say, your The Works Seattle outfit. That's awesome. So thanks again so much for your time and for sharing your story too. Just like from the very beginning, I just the whole surrogate thing is really fascinating, and then just giving birth to this amazing business. So best of luck in
Thank you.
expanding across the country and the world with your empire.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Isn't she great? I just love how she's moved through situations that might have devastated other people. She really has been able to turn things around and just make them into a positive. Check out theworksseattle.com for classes if you're in the area. And if you're not, you never know. Maybe her empire will spread to your city soon. For links to all the things we chatted about in this episode, go to shesboldpodcast.com/episodes. And there you will find the show notes for this and all of my other conversations. You can also find those links and show notes in whatever podcast app it is you're using to listen to this. If you'd like to support the show and let me know how much you are inspired by these conversations and how much you look forward to hearing all of these uplifting stories, go to shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon. Patreon supporters get access to bonus content, which is usually in the form of a question I ask the guest. And this week, you'll find out about where Kellie's quote-unquote fire in the belly, as she calls it, comes from, and why her husband calls her a Planosaurus Rex. Don't forget to check out my tours at wandertours.com. I've got trips to Morocco, Papua New Guinea, and culinary tours to Seattle and Santa Fe coming up. You can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. And more recently, you're going to see some pretty awesome photos from Papua New Guinea on both my Facebook and my Instagram accounts. Ladies, you can join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Be Bold group for support and encouragement for whatever ways you're trying to be bold. We're also setting up some really neat Be Bold meetup groups around the country, so you can sign up for those if you're interested on that Facebook group. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.